I'm excited to be here. I am incredibly sleepy because I have a 1-year-old who we just transitioned to the big girl bed, and she doesn't seem to care. So around 4 a.m. this morning, we actually gathered that she had been walking up and down the hallway all night, doing what? I have no idea. And so I'm tired, and she's probably going to do the same thing tonight. Anywho, I was commissioned to speak to the sensitive subject of trauma and how there is the immense reality that there is hope in the midst of it. That in all the kinds of pains and difficulties in life, that God is able to redeem the worst of it. So I'm just simply gonna tell my story, and I pray that through it the Lord would do a thing. It is hard to describe a scene that I think is a bit undescribable, especially considering age and how it makes memories a bit dim and inaccurate. I don't remember the plot points. I don't know what color shirt I had on. I don't remember what I ate for breakfast. All I know is that the room that it happened in was dark. I don't remember how he got me to follow him into the basement, if he bartered me with the promise of toys or candy, if he led me by the hand, or if I ran after him like any child under 7 does when around a teenage boy that they trust. But there I was, completely unaware, with no context for how familiarity with someone by no means excludes them from harming the ones that they know. If anything, it always proved to be the currency of abuse. To him already was to know him already was to leave my heart unguarded. So imagine my surprise when I was told to do something that I've never done. This act and my inability to breathe during it, the dark basement, the adults upstairs who didn't seem to think it strange that a 16-year-old boy was downstairs in the basement with a first grader. My mother at work was believing her baby to be safe, trusting that the people she left her daughter in the care of would protect me as only she would. But again, there is the contradiction of familiar. You expect it and the people it describes, such as family and friends, to mean that if they are familiar, that they are therefore trustworthy. You hope that their nearness makes them that, or at least you hope that they would have enough wisdom to know that if there is a serpent up their sleeves, but he is crafty enough to hide behind the most protective eyes. When the teenage boy, the one whose name I will forever remember and never speak, was finished, I was able to breathe again. And he never told me not to tell, or maybe he did, and I just don't remember. What I do know is that it became a secret, because to tell someone, I thought, was to implicate myself in the act of doing something that ought not to be done. Being a child, I did not have the capacity to even consider that this evil was not also my own. I followed him into the basement. I whispered in between the shadows. I quieted my laugh to replace it with silence, and I let him take my breath and my body. I didn't speak of that day until I learned of its name. I was 14, at home, watching an episode of Oprah because she's everybody's therapist. And there was a woman speaking with tears in her eyes and a cracked voice. And she was telling Oprah about the molestation that she experienced in her home. And she described the scene in which her innocence was overcome. And the interesting thing that happened is that as I listened to her story, I thought about the basement. I thought about its darkness and what happened inside of it. What I heard from her and what I remembered sounded the same, except I had never given it a name before like she did. To me, it was just something that happened, but according to this woman, I was actually a victim of sexual abuse. To call it by name allowed me to connect some dots. The consequences of the abuse, like fear and shame and control, dominated my days, but it had a source that I never could acknowledge until it was reintroduced to me. It wasn't merely that a teenage boy did something to me when I was little. That's a bit too abstract. It was that I was molested and violated by an image bearer who did not see me as one. What happened was demonic. What happened was perversion, a tragedy, the product of a corrupted bloodline and a cursed humanity, a dying boy spreading death because he thought to steal from me would give him life. To call it by name, no matter how painful, was to make sense of it all, to put flesh on bones and watch it walk. If I wanted to be healed, I needed to be specific about what was broken. I always thought that healing was an immediate act of God that depended on the measure of my faith. Like the woman who was bleeding, and the bleeding stopped the moment she touched God's clothes. I didn't have a hem to hold, but I had a lot of time to pray, to ask God to deliver me from what that almost man did. But from what I've come to learn about God is that his healing is gradual and unassuming. And it usually begins with the hard work and sometimes unintentional revelation that the trauma even exists. Everything related to my molestation that needed to be healed had to be acknowledged first. It wasn't until my now husband began to pursue me that much of the pain that I didn't know was there was unearthed. He liked me, I liked him, he had a full beard that could connect. And so, had to put some humor there. He liked me, and I liked him. But when he said it, when he pursued, I shut down. I became hard. I became unfeeling. And for the life of me, I didn't understand why. It wasn't a decision that I deliberately tried to make. I wanted to love him freely. I wanted to let him hold me. I wanted to be vulnerable, but I couldn't because I had already let a man lead me before. I learned the lesson on letting a man use my trust as food for his demons, and it made me hypervigilant. Always needing answers to motivate me to action. Always questioning things, so I always had enough information to make sure I was safe. How could I know that this new boy wouldn't do the same as the old one? That he actually wanted me and not my body? What proof did I have that I'd be able to breathe when he was around? That I wouldn't have to hold my breath waiting on him to finish. Trauma makes you inquisitive. It makes you doubt everything and everybody. It makes you squint your eye at the familiar and rummage through your memories and project all the pain onto everybody that doesn't deserve it. It makes you afraid to be yourself. It makes you afraid to be honest, to have faith in anything other than God and your own self-preservation. It makes you jealous when you see other people who only held their breath underwater and not in basements, when you see that they have no fear of swimming in the dark, when you see a woman be held by her lover and she loves it, that they don't resist the affection for fear of what it might mean. They delight in his love and they tell him why. They don't see vulnerability as a threat, but as a gift. The sexually traumatized can only imagine a world where they don't see a ghost in their bedroom at all times. I cannot tell you how frustrated I am at times, because it does not matter how much theology I know, how many books I read, how many sermons I preach. I am still affected by what happened when I was 7. Even though my mind doesn't remember the details, my body does. I am all of 33, and I still feel like a 7-year-old at times. I have made a living out of showing people how to breathe, but here I am still holding my breath, still wondering if when I come to the surface, somebody will be there to say, you will be okay. There are millions of people in this city, in this country, on this planet who feel the same, who have been hurt by somebody somewhere, and to them I say, use it. Use the pain. Pain has value insofar as we recognize its redemptive qualities. There is the Joseph of Genesis, who was rejected and slandered and oppressed and forgotten by people, yet seen by God. He was exalted as a lesser Pharaoh, and by virtue of everything bad that he endured, he was able through God's power to save an entire nation. There is Hannah, whose own body refused to obey its design year after year. This woman was infertile and provoked by the other woman in her home. Because of it, this pain drove her into a temple where she begged the Lord of hosts to give her a son with the vow that she would give him right back. God looked upon the affliction of his servant and gave her Samuel, a prophet and a priest who led God's people in truth. There is David, a shepherd and a king who was hunted by the man he tried to serve and by the son who wanted his position. And in the midst of the fear, in the midst of the betrayal, in the midst of all that, do you know what he did? He wrote songs to God for God's people. These songs were written in caves and darkness, and yet they are scripture. In the middle of trauma, David's words were being breathed out by God. Until this day, we all benefit from what he was able to create when he was hurting on this side of heaven. When there is pain, use it. But with that said, I must say this. Heaven has become my ultimate hope of healing. And it isn't that God is not healing me now, because he is. He is using my husband's patient love, my community's constant ear, and my therapist's insight to mend me, but I am not satisfied with that. And I don't think I have to be. That this incomplete healing is what propels my hope for a more sufficient one. A healing that is not limited by time and space, a healing that is not immediately undone by what triggers me. There in heaven is where I will be made whole, and not merely by faith, but it will be tangible. I will see it. I will feel it. I will know it. I won't need a sermon or a podcast or a conference or a book or a counselor. It will be real, an eternity where reality will be that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life. This body. This body with all of its fear and the shame it carries will be done anew. I will no longer have to force myself to think on what is pure. It will do it as a reflex. Whatever memories I will have, they won't control me. They will simply remind me of Jesus and how he suffered too, how men made in his image did not recognize him as God. And they abused his body before killing it, but they could not control the body nor the God that they abused. His resurrection is all the proof that I need that he will make all things new, not just this world and the heavens and the church, but me, my mind and my body and my heart will resurrect as something glorious. What I love most about that place called heaven is that there will be a man there that has never taken advantage of me. A man that has always used his power to serve, a man who unrobed himself to cover our shame, and we must follow him out of darkness and into his marvelous light. And when we get there, we will breathe at all times. There he is, seated at the right hand of the Father and mine, fully victorious, not only over my sin, but over all the sins of those against me. Neither their sin or mine was missed on Calvary. Jesus sees and settles the dust that the devil kicked up around us. The serpent might be crafty, but he is still a created thing that must bow. The devil and death that he brings, or the devil and the death that he brings will die. And this is our hope, saints, that all will be made right. One day we serve a just God, even when it doesn't feel like it. There will be a new heaven. There will be a new earth with new people living on it, people we can know well and trust thoroughly. And don't think that when I speak of heaven, I am disregarding the trauma of today. I speak about heaven because it reminds me that today and all of its troubles aren't eternal. So I can be honest about my struggle without being cynical. And I can look forward to what is to come without being negligent. Jesus is healing me. Jesus will heal me. It is a already and not yet reality that has made my days much brighter. And guess what? As he heals us, he will use us too. Trauma cannot and will not have the final say. Jesus will. Thank you.